So I've tried to live my life in a way that, and then, you know, during the divorce, they printed fucking horrible lies. Horrible, mean.
Like what?
For more than a year after Jennifer Lopez filed for divorce, Ben Affleck said almost nothing publicly about what had happened to their marriage. That changed across the spring of 2025, when Affleck gave his most candid comments yet to GQ, and later offered warm, unscripted praise for his ex-wife on a red carpet. Paired with Lopez's own remarks from the fall of 2024, the record of what both parties have actually said, on court paperwork and in their own words, tells a clear, if less sensational, story than the one that circulated in tabloids. This piece sticks to what is documented. Court filings and interviews Affleck and Lopez gave to named outlets, with dates and direct sourcing throughout. Where outlets characterize or analyze events, that framing is attributed to them, not presented as established fact. Affleck and Lopez first got together in 2002 after meeting on the set of Giggly, a romantic caper that was poorly received by critics, and got engaged later that year. Their first run as a couple made them arguably the most heavily covered celebrity pairing of the era, with paparazzi coverage so intense that both later cited it as a factor in the relationship's collapse. They postponed their planned 2003 wedding just days before the ceremony and called off the engagement altogether in January 2004, shortly before their second film together, Jersey Girl, was released. Lopez addressed that first breakup on her 2002 album, This Is Me, Then, which included the song Dear Ben, written about Affleck. Both went on to marry other people. Lopez married singer Mark Anthony in 2004, divorced him years later, and was briefly engaged to former New York Yankees player Alex Rodriguez before that relationship ended in 2021. Affleck married actress Jennifer Garner in 2005. The two shared 3 children, Violet, Serafina, and Samuel, before divorcing in 2018. Affleck and Lopez reconnected in April 2021, shortly after Lopez's split from Rodriguez, nearly 2 decades after their first breakup, in a reunion that tabloids quickly branded Bennifer 2.0. They made their first public red carpet appearance as a rekindled couple in September 2021, at the premiere of The Last Duel in Venice, a film Affleck co-wrote and starred in. They married twice within a month of each other in the summer of 2022, a quiet, impromptu ceremony in Las Vegas on July 16th, followed by a larger, more traditional wedding for family and friends in Riceboro, Georgia, on August 20th, 2022. Their reunion became the basis for one of the most publicized creative projects of Lopez's career. Her 2024 album, This Is Me, Now, and its accompanying visual film, This Is Me, Now, a love story, were both built around the story of her relationship with Affleck. Lopez told Reuters at the film's February 2024 premiere that the project reflected her growing interest at that stage of her life in being more vulnerable and honest about her own experiences. The film's director, Dave Meyers, later told ABC News that Lopez had shared deeply personal material with him during their earliest conversations about the project, specifically about the pain of her first breakup with Affleck 2 decades earlier, and that the imagery in the film, including a metaphorical heart factory sequence, grew out of that conversation. Affleck himself appeared in 2 small, heavily disguised cameo roles in the film, as a motorcycle rider and as a wigged, prosthetic-laden newscaster named Rex Stone. Lopez filed for divorce from Affleck on August 20th, 2024, in Los Angeles County Superior Court, a date multiple outlets, including Variety, TMZ, and CBS News, noted was exactly 2 years to the day after the couple's Georgia wedding. The filing was made without an attorney, and Lopez listed the date of separation as April 26, 2024, meaning the marriage had effectively ended nearly 4 months before the paperwork was filed. She cited irreconcilable differences and asked that neither party be awarded spousal support. Reporting at the time also noted the couple had no prenuptial agreement. In the months leading up to the filing, tabloids had already begun speculating about trouble in the marriage. Lopez attended the 2024 Met Gala without Affleck in early May, serving as an honorary co-chair of the event, and reports at the time noted that had been one of several solo appearances at Spring, including a trip to Italy and time spent in the Hamptons while Affleck remained in Los Angeles. Around the same period, reports emerged that Affleck had moved his belongings out of the couple's shared home and into a rental property in Brentwood. Later that month, Lopez announced she was canceling her summer concert tour. This Is Me, Live, to spend time with her children and family, writing on social media that she was completely heartsick and devastated about disappointing fans, and that she wouldn't be making the decision if she didn't feel it was absolutely necessary. The couple's divorce was finalized in January 2025, roughly 5 months after the filing. Lopez addressed the breakup publicly before Affleck did. In a conversation with comedian Nikki Glazer published in Interview magazine on October 9, 2024, Lopez described a period around her separation as, in her words, probably the hardest time of her life. She said that after years of feeling she had finally reached a good place professionally and personally, her world exploded that year, coming shortly after the release of her album and its accompanying documentary, This Is Me? Now, a love story, which had chronicled her love story with Affleck. Lopez told Glazer she had come to recognize that being in a relationship doesn't define her, and that she needed time on her own, telling the comedian she wasn't looking to date anyone. She described feeling that she needed to go off and be on my own, in part to prove to herself that she was capable of it, and that in the aftermath of the split she experienced a mix of fear, sadness, and desperation before arriving at a steadier place. She also framed the year as difficult but ultimately worthwhile, saying it was simultaneously the hardest and, in some ways, the most valuable period of self-work she'd gone through, telling Glazer she had needed roughly 3 decades to fully internalize that she didn't need to grow old with somebody else in order to feel whole. Separately, in comments to people about canceling her tour, she said she had been so devastated at the idea of letting fans down, but that she was ultimately glad she made the call, calling the resulting stretch of time both the hardest period of her life and one that let her do meaningful work on herself. She also thanked her fan base directly for their patience, describing them as unusually understanding compared to other celebrities' followings. It's worth noting Lopez did not name Affleck directly in the Glazer conversation, though the timing, subject matter, and surrounding press coverage made clear which relationship she was describing. Affleck's own extended public comments came several months later in a cover story for GQ published March 25, 2025, conducted by writer Zach Barron. Speaking to the difficulty of explaining a high-profile breakup to outsiders, Affleck said there was a tendency for people to look for a single dramatic root cause in breakups, when the reality was, in his description, much more mundane than people might expect or want it to be. He characterized the split in stark terms: no scandal, no soap opera, no intrigue. Much of the public attention centered on a specific metaphor Affleck used, one he said he had also used in Lopez's own documentary. He compared marrying a person defined by extraordinary fame to marrying a ship's captain and then objecting to going out on the water, the point being that a person has to accept, going in, the nature of the life they are choosing. He was careful to add that this framing wasn't meant to identify a single cause of the marriage failure, and that watching the documentary wouldn't reveal some hidden explanation for their problems. In a follow-up conversation with the same writer days later, Affleck reiterated that despite discussing his personal life, he wanted to be clear that he holds a great deal of respect for his ex-wife. Affleck also spoke about why he was reluctant to discuss the relationship at all, describing the reluctance as less about protecting a narrative and more about the discomfort of being vulnerable in public, noting that sharing such personal material felt embarrassing not out of shame, but because it's inherently exposing. The GQ profile also gave Affleck room to explain his decision to participate in Lopez's 2024 documentary in the first place, something that had puzzled some observers given his well-established preference for privacy. He said that once he'd agreed to take part, he wanted to approach it honestly and make it something genuinely interesting, calling the broader examination of a public relationship a subject he found worthwhile in its own right. He went on to draw a direct contrast between his own temperament and Lopez's, telling the magazine that she has handled the demands of celebrity more skillfully than he has, and that his own inclination runs toward being more reserved and private than Hayes. He framed this not as a grievance, but as an observation about compatibility, describing his reaction to that mismatch as one of genuine curiosity about how two people who love and believe in each other can still hold fundamentally different attitudes toward exposure and public life. 3 weeks after the GQ story published, Affleck appeared at the Los Angeles premiere of The Accountant 2 on April 16, 2025, at the TCL Chinese Theater. He arrived with all 3 of his children, with Jennifer Garner, Violet, Serafina, and Samuel, and Lopez's twins with Mark Antony. Max and Emmy were also in attendance, giving the event a visibly blended family character. Speaking with Entertainment Tonight on the carpet, Affleck offered some of his warmest public comments yet about his ex-wife, calling her spectacular, saying she's great with his kids and describing an ongoing, positive relationship between her and his children. He went further, calling her an important, high-integrity person he admires and is grateful to, and said he doesn't pay much attention to online commentary that tends to look for negativity in their story. He also expressed enthusiasm about having all 5 children together at the premiere, calling it exciting and something that brought him joy, and told ET he loves Lopez's children and considers them wonderful. Coverage of the event, including from People, E! News, and CBR, framed it consistently, a blended family outing that doubled as an unplanned but pointed rebuttal to any suggestion of lingering hostility between the two. Outlets noted the symbolism of the timing. The premiere came just 3 months after their divorce was finalized, and roughly 3 weeks after Affleck's GQ comments had generated a fresh wave of tabloid speculation about the state of their relationship. Entertainment Tonight co-host Nischelle Turner, who conducted the red carpet interview, remarked to Affleck that it was notable he was maintaining relationships with Lopez's children, to which he agreed and added that he tends not to read much online commentary, sensing that some coverage is oriented toward finding something negative to say regardless of facts. Strip away the tabloid framing, and the documented facts are fairly narrow. Lopez filed for divorce on a date that was symbolically loaded, the couple's own wedding anniversary, after a separation that had already been underway for months. She spoke first and more emotionally about the toll of that period, describing it as devastating while also framing it as a season of personal growth. Affleck, when he eventually addressed it, offered a more analytical account, an acknowledgement that a highly public marriage carries a public cost, paired with an explicit refusal to frame the split as scandalous or driven by any single incident. Weeks later, both his words and his presence at a family event pointed toward an amicable, co-parenting-focused relationship going forward, with his own children and Lopez's spending time together as a blended family. None of the public record, the court filing, the interview piece, the GQ profile, or the accountant 2 red carpet comments supports characterizations of the split as bitter, vindictive, or scandal-driven. If anything, the through line across both of their accounts is a shared insistence that the reasons were ordinary, personal, and not particularly dramatic, even as the divorce itself played out in an intensely public arena. Times Affleck and Lopez date, get engaged, and postpone their wedding before splitting. Times the two reconnect following Lopez's breakup with Alex Rodriguez. Times Affleck and Lopez marry in a small ceremony in Las Vegas. Times a larger wedding ceremony follows in Riceboro, Georgia. Times Lopez releases the album, This Is Me, Now, and the companion film, This Is Me, Now, a love story, both built around her relationship with Affleck. Affleck appears in disguised cameo roles. Times a date Lopez later lists in court filings as the couple's official date of separation. Times Lopez attends a Met Gala alone. Reports note Affleck moving out of their shared home. Lopez cancels her summer concert tour. Times Lopez files a divorce in Los Angeles County Superior Court on the couple's second wedding anniversary, without an attorney and without a prenuptial agreement in place. Times Lopez's interview with Nikki Glaser is published in Interview magazine, in which she described the period as the hardest of her life. Times the divorce is finalized. Times Affleck's GQ cover profile is published, in which he addresses a split publicly for the first time in detail. Times Affleck praises Lopez on the red carpet at the Los Angeles premiere of The Accountant 2, attended by both of their children. It's worth being clear about the limits of the public record. Neither Affleck nor Lopez has given a detailed, blow-by-blow account of what specifically led to their separation beyond the general themes both have publicly acknowledged, namely, differing comfort levels with fame and public exposure. Reporting on the lead-up to the filing, including details about Affleck moving out of their shared home or Lopez's solo appearances at Spring, comes from entertainment press sourcing at outlets like Fox News, TMZ, and The Hollywood Reporter, rather than from statements by Affleck or Lopez themselves, and should be read with that distinction in mind. Likewise, characterizations of the GQ interview or The Accountant 2 remarks as a deliberate exit strategy or calculated media rollout are interpretations that have appeared in some entertainment coverage, not claims either Affleck or Lopez has made about his or her own intentions. This piece has tried to separate what was actually said or filed from the narrative framing that has grown up around it.